Latin Dragons began in the year 1979 at the intersection of 87th and Escanaba in the South Chicago neighborhood. The Latin Dragon name came from martial arts because the founder and first president was a 7th-degree black belt in martial arts. The black dragon symbol is a known martial arts symbol. I am not sure who were the earliest opponents of the Latin Dragons. Mario was the chief of the Latin Dragons while the president was the founder. In the year 1983, Latin Kings began to develop in the South Chicago area as the Latin Counts also began recruiting after they initially arrived in 1980. The Latin Dragons back up Latin Kings and Latin Counts in fights, and this led to the Latin Dragons joining the People Alliance in 1983. By this time, the Latin Dragons developed a heavy rivalry with King Cobras and Spanish gangster disciples. The Dragons eventually expanded to have turf at 88th and Buffalo and 90th and Houston. The Dragons expanded greatly to have turf from 83rd to 87th and Colfax to commercial Dragon Town. In the year 1987, Mario became semi-retired, leaving another legend to run the Dragons, 18-year-old Henry Garcia. Henry was a truly fearless warrior in the streets and was well respected. Latin Dragons remained close allies with Latin Kings and Latin Counts going into the early 1990s. In the year 1992, Latin Kings began to push the Latin Dragons around and start trouble, which the Latin Dragons had no tolerance for this, and a war erupted. In the year 1995, the Dragons began to have friction with the Latin Counts. During this friction, war began, which led to the death of Henry Garcia. Henry was shot to death by Latin Counts as they shot him several times. Henry Garcia was 26 years old when he was killed and ran the Dragons for 8 years. By 1996, the Latin Dragons dropped out of the People Nation Alliance and began gunning for Latin Kings, Latin Counts, and Spanish Vice Lords. In the year 1997, Latin Dragons were numbered at about 30 members but fought like they were much larger. Dragons were causing heavy damage to their enemies, causing these bigger groups to call truces on multiple occasions. Once Latin Dragon members would move into the prison system, they found themselves surrounded by Latin Kings. Therefore, the Dragons found common ground with insane Dragons from the north side of the city from East Humboldt Park. Dragons also united with the Spanish gangster disciples and then joined the Folk Alliance both in prison and on the streets. The Latin Dragons really have not lost any turf over the years and viciously fight other gangs using whatever means necessary to retain their turf. The Dragons have also been very choosy about who they let into their numbers, not allowing recruitment of just anyone.